What if Sigmund Freud, the great pioneer of psychology and apparently a very passionate disbeliever in God, was put in a room with C.S. Lewis, the famous writer of the Narnia books and also a very passionate believer in Christ? Well, that's what this film is about. It's a what if scenario of these two great historical, literary, scientific figures had to get into a room and discuss God. And I thought this film was incredibly thought-provoking, incredibly engaging. The dialogue just really sucked me in. These two actors, these two great performers, Matthew Good and Anthony Hopkins, they both really just kept me engaged, and it's a combination of their great performances and the great dialogue and the subject matter. Now, the subject matter may be boring. The film might be boring for many types of people, but for me, it just kept me sucked in and it kept me thinking the whole time. It's kind of like the film Heretic. You could see in my review, I said that the film was discussing God. It just kept me reflecting a lot because I am a religious person. I also contemplate God and contemplate this world and our place, God's place in this world. Why does God allow suffering? And this film really tackles all those things. So this film is directed by Matthew Brown, and it is based off of a stage play by the same name by Mark St. Germain. And he was inspired by a book called The Question of God by a Harvard professor named Armand Nikolai. I want to read this book because I'm curious, but in that book, he apparently makes a claim or a theory or a what if scenario that weeks before Sigmund Freud died by assisted suicide, he called upon an Oxford professor to talk. And that's the only official report, but Armand Nikolai is making the claim, or I don't know if it's a claim or just a what if fantasy, but that perhaps he called upon C.S. Lewis to discuss God before he was gonna kill himself because he had some sort of cancer in his mouth or in his jaw, something like that, and he was in terrible pain. And you see that throughout the film. You see Anthony Hopkins, you see Freud dealing with this pain, putting morphine in his drinks, and he just clearly is a miserable man. Even though he is a grumpy old man, he still is very much the insightful scientific figure. And I think that he lives up to that in the film. And I think he was paired well with C.S. Lewis, a very calm, Christian-like man who also is very well-read and intelligent and academic. And I just felt like those two figures clashing was great. It was done very well. As I said, the conversations, the dialogue was just so engaging, immersive. I just constantly found myself just pausing it or rewinding it. Luckily, I was watching it on Netflix. I found myself many times rewinding scenes, rewinding conversations because the film is tackling heavy stuff: religion, God, suffering, all that, war. This film takes place during World War II era. The film provides no answers. I mean, how could you? But the film leaves you with a very deep impression, at least for me, very personal. All this is not an objective, concrete perspective. This is all just very much me and how this film hit me, and it really just checked all the boxes for me. I was very immersed, and I got a lot out of it. I found also, just to be a little bit technical and a little to put on my my cinephile cap, I found the film very immersive in its production design because the even though the film is one conversation, they're not just in one room the whole time. There is flashbacks, and there is a scene where they go walk around a garden and they go to a church, and every scene, every house, every set piece was very immersive. It really did feel like 1930s, late 1930s. Just little details like when the radio's on. I'm sure there are probably real recordings, which is why, but just these voices, these British radio shows, just it sounded so authentic, and just I don't know, the film just very much created an atmosphere that I very much enjoyed. And also the color grading, the lighting, I really enjoyed the lighting of this film. I felt like the film was very moody and had great shadows, and even when they're in the house in Freud's study, there's just a palette that I was very pleased to see. Yeah, once again, this film was just very thought-provoking. I would recommend it to anyone who is a deep thinker, someone who considers God, considers this world. Why does God allow suffering? And this film, as I said, does not offer any answers, but at the end of the conversation, the two characters say something that I felt was very profound, because I felt that was the point of the film. And I'll read it. Freud says, "What were we thinking? It was madness thinking we could solve the greatest mystery of all time." And Lewis replies, "Well, there's a greater madness, not to think of it at all." And I just felt like that was perfect. And that's not exactly how the film ends, but it's when they're wrapping up the conversation. And I really appreciated that line because I felt like that's so true. It's just good to discuss these things. It's good to have deep conversations. It's good to really think things through. And I think this film does a really good portrayal of just two people who disagree passionately about something serious, and yet they still respect each other. And they want to discuss it. They want to get to the bottom of it, even though they both know they won't be able to. They both are making this effort to entertain this thought. Sometimes Freud was a little bit disrespectful but as a whole, he comes off as a grumpy old man. And also he knows he's a living legend, so he has that confidence, that perhaps arrogance. He has that air to him. And he is the senior of Lewis, so of course he might add some jabs or maybe says things a little bit disrespectful to Lewis. But I still think as a whole, they're quite respectful towards each other despite the serious disagreements. And I just really appreciated that in the film and from these two characters, these two historical figures. Of course, we will never know, but it's a great little what if scenario. And yeah, I got a lot out of it. I hope people check this out, or if you have checked it out, again, I know I'm a year late to it, if not more. Let me know your thoughts on the film, if hopefully I've swayed you to want to check it out. And if you don't mind, let me know your thoughts on God and why does God allow suffering, or just anything really in that nature. I'd be very curious to know people's perspectives. Thanks for watching.